For more on this story, we can bring in our foreign affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, Merz and Starmer have been speaking. What have they been saying?
Well, first of all, let's get used to this. We're going to be seeing a lot more of these one-on-one, these bilateral meetings of leaders from big European powers talking about how they can, in what they're all calling our shared new era, an era transformed by notably Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine, by Donald Trump's retrenchment in his America First agenda, how they can all work together to somehow protect themselves better within the framework of NATO. So this comes 1 week after. You'll remember, we were here on the set talking about the same exact thing. Emmanuel Macron last week was on a state visit to Britain, met with the King and with the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, speaking about a lot of the same stuff. Slightly different nuances and details. In the French UK case, they were talking about how they could perhaps make their nuclear arsenals work together within some framework to perhaps not entirely replace, but offer an alternative, if you will, to the U.S. security umbrella that Donald Trump has all but yanked away from Europe lately. So there was that. This time, you have the Chancellor of Germany, Europe's biggest economic power, Britain, which is no longer part of the European Union, but still very much a part of Europe, and perhaps taking on post-Brexit a more prominent role than it ever could have hoped for in the context of what I was saying, the tensions with Trump's America, the war that Vladimir Putin is waging against Ukraine. UK is, you can argue, needed more than ever before, in a sense. So Europe, this is an outreach that is a mutual outreach. And they both spoke at the very beginning. Keir Starmer talked about, a shared responsibility for shared security in a shared new era. A lot of sharing here. Look, they signed a big new treaty. It's the first major bilateral treaty between Britain and Germany of this kind, really ever. Yeah, there have been agreements in the aftermath of World War II, but an agreement that touches on cooperation in both defense and security. As Friedrich Merz said in his comments, security is the thread that runs through this new treaty. And also, obviously, migration, because the two sides have to tackle migration. This was a giant issue at Macron's summit with Starmer a week ago. So Germany is pledging also to find new ways of cracking down on the smuggling networks that ultimately bring human beings to Britain, to the UK. That's a giant issue in the UK right now. And also on the economy, the economic cooperation, hundreds of millions of pounds in new projects between these two countries, including the potentiality for a new rail link between UK and Germany. Big thing, obviously, Ukraine, right? If you're saying what's the biggest takeaway here, they have to right away, right now, here and now, think of how they are going to make their defense commitments work both together, but also for the good of Europe, to protect Europe from what they both regard as a clear and imminent danger from Vladimir Putin's Russia, even if, and this is a giant if, somehow a ceasefire emerges in the coming weeks and months in Ukraine, Putin will still be there, and he will still, from the perspective of both these leaders, pose a clear and imminent threat to Europe.
You mentioned that ceasefire because Donald Trump just a couple of days ago threatened secondary sanctions on Russia if the war doesn't come to an end and the ceasefire is observed. Now we have 47 days. The clock is ticking down, but at the same time, Russia is not undeterred. It continues its offensive in Ukraine.
And that's an objective statement, right? It's not even a question to me, because the Kremlin has responded today to that ultimatum, essentially saying that they don't take ultimatums from, Donald Trump or anyone else. They will not be dictated to. Vladimir Putin is waging, making the decisions, as the Kremlin sees it, that he says he must take. We've heard for months, if not years now, that for him, this is about addressing the, quote, root causes. I say it as a euphemism. Vladimir Putin doesn't use it as a euphemism, but root causes being basically the emasculation of Ukraine as a viable state, a viable sovereign nation with an emasculated army that is no real viable army, and a NATO that is basically also emasculated, pushed back, defanged, if you will. Those are root causes. That's why we're not going to see a ceasefire anytime soon, because a lot of it is a false narrative, fabricated root causes that are not just infeasible, but impossible in any real way, realistic way in the modern world to address the way Putin wants to address them. So right now, from where we stand, Putin will continue to wage this special military operation as he sees the only way fit. Donald Trump will continue to play the political games that he has to play. He will not be listened to by Vladimir Putin. No amount of pressure can be brought to bear upon Vladimir Putin by way of sanctions or other that will deter him, as you said, from his ultimate goals. He is in this for his legacy, as he sees it, in history, and he is not going to stop at anything until he gets his maximalist goals achieved.
Thank you very much for that, Douglas Herbert there.